Hi, I'm Timm Amanda.
And I'm Amanda Stradling. We are East Valley Leader Lab, and this is our podcast, Mind and Body at Work.
Wellness, well-being, and mindfulness are trending right now as organizations try to attract and retain the best talent in this tumultuous post-COVID world. At the Leader Lab, we agree these are important concepts and overdue for being fully utilized in the workplace.
We also believe that these concepts only work when you treat the mind and body as a whole. We are excited to be part of a societal shift in attention toward the whole person. We invite you to join us as we begin to look broadly and deeply at wellness, well-being, and mindfulness in the workplace.
Welcome to Mind and Body at Work with myself, Timm Amanda, and my partner at East Valley Leader Lab, Amanda Stradling. So in today's podcast, we're going to turn the tables a little bit. Instead of interviewing our guests, we're going to have them interview us. We know they'll do a great job of interviewing because our guests have a podcast that we listen to and recommend. Dan Winter and Elayna Alexandra are both with Altus Growth Partners, part of a consulting group who hosts the podcast on turning groups into teams called Missing Conversations. So welcome, Dan and Elayna, and we're going to let you take it from here.
Timm and Amanda, it's absolutely a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you and find out a little bit more about the work you're doing at East Valley Leader Lab. And it also is a delight to be here with Elayna. Always fun to work with her. Timm, Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about what you've created at Leadership Lab?
Oh, of course. So we feel that the East Valley Leader Lab is a very unique company with a very special offering. The Leader Lab is a space of personal growth and exploration. Our key curriculum really centers around embodiment. And for us, that means taking the concepts of leadership and the way you want to show up in the world and really embodying that, like becoming the type of leader you want to be. And that is not just a mental journey you take, but you use your whole body. At least we do in the Leader Lab. Your body is your greatest tool in your personal development, and we have some really wonderful, interactive, somatic practices to help you accomplish that.
Exactly. And also, I think we hope what we've created is a resource for leaders at all levels of organizations, really anybody who has a team. In particular, leaders who are interested in growing personally and in really providing some development and growth for their teams. And I just want to mention, in addition to the leadership curriculum, so we have a 3-course curriculum that we've designed to be, first of all, effective in improving embodied learning, but also affordable and manageable. You know, we've designed it. I worked in organizations for a long time. And we've designed it to make it very reasonable to be implemented on-site in an organization or off-site. And then we have a new offer at the Leader Lab it's all about well-being.
Yes.
Do you want to say anything about that?
Certainly. So this one is wonderful because it's not the 3-5-week courses. It's a one-time class that we can come and teach at your location. And it's meant to be a very enjoyable, relaxing experience. So learning with the East Valley Leader Lab is very experiential. And we will have a beautiful Tai Chi practice for you that will help you step into your body and be present in that moment, experience a sense of calm that you can take into the workplace. And I'm sure that your customers, your team, they're going to notice how you're showing up if you take these relaxing practices into your life.
Yeah, I just want to reemphasize, the importance. You can do these embodiment and mindfulness practices in a quiet room by yourself or with a teacher. But what we're really going for is, can you take these practices with you into action in your organization, right? When you're having a stressful day, when you're in a pressurized situation, do you remember these practices and how they can help you get into your body and use that to show up the way you want to show up?
So, can you give me some examples of what's the shift that participants find?
You want me to
You can take that one.
go first on
That's
that
a
one?
great question.
Yeah, I mean, I always, it always takes me back to my experience. And so one of the key shifts for me was learning to trust myself. I used to have to, anytime I was going to get in front of a client or, present at a conference, which I did on a regular basis, I felt that I needed to prepare and prepare and prepare and rehearse, sometimes to the point of memorization. And I was doing that because I was scared to death, that I was going to blow it and people were going to decide, that I wasn't really an expert. And so one of the key shifts for me, and part of it came from practicing coaching other people. When you're coaching, you need to trust yourself to come up with the next question. You can't write all the questions in advance because you have no idea what the person's going through and what they're going to say. And it was through coaching that I learned slowly that if I just stay still and really listen, the next question comes up every time. So that was my shift from really not trusting myself. I had to have everything prepared in advance to trusting myself to just be present and respond to what's going on in the room.
So what's different than just waking up in the morning and saying, I'm going to trust myself? How does this build a new practice, a new capability?
Let me just carry on from what I
Yeah.
was saying. And
Build
then,
on
and then,
that.
Yeah, and then you build on that.
Okay.
So for me, when I woke up in the morning, my body, well, first of all, I wasn't in touch with my body at all, right? So if I was aware of anything in my body, it was nervousness and anxiety that was making me want to prepare, right? The only way I can feel good about this is if I prepare and prepare. And I didn't have the ability to calm myself, and then I had stuff going on in my mind, right? I was telling myself a story about what's going to happen if I blow it when I blow it. So it takes, first of all, awareness to realize you're doing this to yourself, and then practice. A lot of practice around getting out of my head and into my body to calm myself, and then you get to more advanced practices from there.
Well, and I'm hearing a piece of my creativity drops away because I am so practicing the rote behavior that I think will make me successful that I'm tamping down creativity, innovation, spontaneity, and ultimately connection with the person I'm trying to talk to, the person I'm trying to influence.
Yes.
That they almost become hecklers in my performance as opposed to partners in my conversation, partners in creativity.
I find that when your nervous system is healthy and regulated, and you're showing up just being present in your body, you are able to make those connections more naturally and organically. And that's where you really unlock a lot of the joy in your work. That's when you can get in touch with what you really care about. And work becomes more meaningful and fulfilling. People naturally want to follow you. And everything unfolds so much better.
I can really see why this is important and how it can affect, everybody involved. But just to reiterate it, why is this work important? Why is it important to show up embodied?
Wow, that's such a good question. Thank you. Do you want me to take that one?
Sure.
Okay. So think about the people that have made the most impact in your life. Do you remember everything they said? Do you know the leadership textbooks that they got their formula from? Probably not. But you remember how they showed up. You remember the energy that they carried. You remember your connection and your relationship with them. And that happened because of the things that they had embodied throughout their life. So we have found that by focusing on the body and the stories and our history that's kind of shaped our nervous system and our body, and creating physical practices that are connected and linked to our, our current behaviors, that we can really become the creators of the way we want to show up. And I think that's what's most influential and most memorable to people.
And that's particularly important for leaders, right? Because what they bring to the party is contagious to everybody else. But another reason this is important is because there are a lot of people, and it seems to be worse than it was when I was embedded in an organization 20 years ago. They're dealing with a lot of stresses. And, there's suffering going on in organizations. And so I felt such a, Dan talked about a shift. I felt such a positive shift when I learned to use these practices to get out of some of my old habits. It's important to me to share that with other people. I want them to be more productive and effective, but also, you can enjoy, what I've learned is you can enjoy and you can be at ease in your work, even during the stressful times. And a lot of people have just not been exposed to that yet.
I love that. I was talking with a client the other day who was having that same kind of panic, right? Literally, when I asked what it felt like when she was in a staff meeting and was on point and didn't know the answer, she said, I feel like I'm going to die. And I realized, we live in bodies that spent 300 years building up a response to physical threat. And we treat everything in that physical response, when in fact it is very rare for any of us to truly face a physical threat at work. And yet that's the only response our body has, right? Downshift, blood runs out of the front of the brain, and you get stupider and afraid. And I'm hearing from you that ability to get our bodies back into a modern life, in a modern situation with modern interactions, to prepare it to deal with people differently than our evolution prepared us for.
Absolutely. When you are in, fight, flight, or freeze mode, you're not only not productive and effective, but your awareness shrinks so much that it's very hard to work and lead other people, because you're just seeing your own situation and your own survival. And so you lose a lot of that connection and impact you have on other people, I think, when you start to feel that panic. Whichever your response is, it brings your world in very tight, and it limits you.
And I think it's also interesting that we can use those hundreds of thousands of years of evolution to our advantage, and we do so at the East Valley Leader Lab. So because of all that history in our bodies, it is not difficult to put people in a situation where they feel threatened, right? We can do very tame seeming exercises, and after we increase people's self-awareness a little bit, they feel those evolutionary physical threats. And we want to create that to a certain extent. We want to create some discomfort, because those are the kinds of threats that people face at work all the time. They're not really physical threats, but they feel like physical threats, like you were saying, Dan. And then the practices are around how do you respond to that? So first, just observing how your body responds to that with no training, and then learning practices to take control of that response, right? Be able to go into a situation knowing that regardless of what comes up and regardless of how your body feels, you're going to be able to use that to get back to what you're focused on in that situation.
Thanks. This is so interesting. You've talked a lot about practices and using our body and how we can maybe regulate our body response differently. And you mentioned very briefly something about Tai Chi. Can you tell me more about what are those practices that you invite leaders into?
That's great. For any of our listeners that don't know what Tai Chi is, I'd imagine most everyone does at this point. I hope it's spreading in popularity. But Tai Chi is about 1,500 years old at least. It comes from China. It was practiced in the Shaolin temples anciently. And it's spread throughout America quite a bit recently. And it's an ancient martial art. But it's not practiced like a self-defense martial art as often. It's practiced mostly in America as a form of relaxation. It's a little bit like Chinese yoga in a way, at least how we teach it. But we do bring in self-defense applications sometimes, but it's like a very slow, safe kind of movement that regulates your nervous system and your breathing, even if it does have self-defense applications. So that's a little bit about what Tai Chi is. The types of moves you might do in a Leader Lab class would be not overly complicated. You get to stand in one place. It's not a big, long routine like you might see people doing in a park, but it's one simple movement that you repeat in time with your breath, and the whole class gets to do it together. One that I love is just for your lungs. And you stretch your arms out wide, you breathe in and you open, you breathe out and you close. I don't want to hit the microphone, but it's just an opening and closing and bringing your mindfulness to your lungs. And you'll feel that breath expanding your whole body. You'll feel it in your spine, and hopefully you'll feel it in your mind. You'll feel a little bit of a mental shift and a relaxation happen. So that's one of the moves we do is lungs. There's a whole bunch.
Yeah, and so you can, we start most of our sessions with some of that Tai Chi, again, to get people out of their head and into their bodies. Even if they haven't had a lot of practice at that, it often has that effect on people. And then we use other exercises, that get at creating some of those discomforts and threat situations. And sometimes the two come together. Sometimes some of the Tai Chi moves are incorporated into these practical exercises. And so each time we're doing these exercises, people are building a capacity to make these connections to, when that situation comes up, I can do this in my body, right, to get that feeling back, to get back to a state of presence or a state of being centered.
So for an example, one that we teach is around the concept of the capacity of saying no. So saying no is something that a lot of people struggle with. I know I have at times in my life. And if you develop the capacity to be, in Tai Chi, we might call it rooted or grounded in your body, then you find it much easier to say no in your life, be more assertive, be less pushed and pulled, because you have this physical sense of being grounded. And you feel stronger when you stand up for yourself and your stance, whatever it is at work that you're saying no to. It can give you that physical capacity.
Do you want to show them a Tai Chi move that sort of helps with that? Just sitting.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I would want to get really even from my right and left. So Tai Chi is very much about balance. I'd get really rooted. And I would have a pretty wide stance. So just picture that. I won't stand up right now. But from a seated position, let's just sink both of our hips into the chair. And then from there, we extend the spine long and tall upward. And it feels very light, like it's being lifted up to the sky. And then we'll take a big inhale and we bring up our arms in this double block. Our elbows are in front of us. And then as we continue to inhale, this elbow comes up. We exhale, push, and turn. Inhale, block. Exhale, push right into Timm. And we want to keep it pretty centered. Breathe in, breathe out. And it becomes a rhythm. Breathing in, breathing out. Okay, so that's the rhythm of it. And just picture that with a full body stance. And that helps you feel, it feels powerful. It feels strong. And we'll bring up imagery also. We'll talk about an oak tree. So that's something we do in our body that translates to a direct situation at work.
And so imagine you're in one of those situations where it's very appropriate for you to say no. And what you might have done in the past is because your body wasn't prepared for it, is you backpedal a little bit and you try to say no without saying no. But if you've done this practice, the situation starts to, you start to get into that situation and you can feel your body. You're not doing it, but you can feel your body getting into that very stable situation, and it's much easier to stand your ground and set your boundary.
Yeah, so my instructor always talked about how you become what you repeatedly do. And your nervous system remembers these little habits. We might have embodied kind of shying away or twisting or tilting or little things closing off our chest, things that make us feel not strong or capable of saying no, but we get to rewire that. So that's what that practice is about, creating new habits in the body.
This is incredible. I can feel the presence that you both bring. I'm curious, for the leaders that are in your program, how long do they need to be in this practice to start seeing the change that I can imagine comes from being able to be more rooted, as you were just discussing, or various other stances that you practice?
So we have a tool, we call it an embodiment roadmap. And we use that to help people see progress all along the way. Because in general, transformational change sort of happens all at once, but it doesn't happen immediately. It's a buildup of practices and capacities. So we give people milestones that they can see progress before a major shift happens, because that's probably going to take months, if not years, to get to those big shifts. And I lost the track of your question.
So you were talking about the roadmap a little bit,
yeah,
and some of the milestones.
Yeah. So and you were asking how long it takes, right? So we have designed our curriculum in 3 5-week courses, and usually we'll go maybe a couple month break between the 5-week courses. And then during the 5 weeks, we're showing them some new practices, and we're giving them a chance to practice them in between sessions and then come back and talk about what they noticed. So it's designed to kind of stretch things out, because this does take a little bit of time. When we first started, our first offer was we were asking people to commit for a year, and we were going to meet with them every other week for a year, in a group setting, because we felt like that was the greatest chance of getting them, to some of those big shifts. And what people told us was, that's a big commitment for something we don't understand what it is yet. And so we pivoted, and we created a curriculum where they get a lot of new awareness in the first course, and usually by the end of that 5-week course, they're like, okay, we're interested in the next 2 5-week courses. they're sticking with it.
Yep. And we also have that wonderful one-time kind of sampler relaxation class, which I feel can be a great benefit in itself. So, I mean, who doesn't feel better after an hour that's focused just on relaxing you and your body and letting everything else slide for a bit? So those little micro shifts shouldn't be undervalued either.
Good point.
Well, and I'm curious, you did this through COVID. What's this like when it's virtual through Zoom as opposed to in person, with other people near you?
We had a lot of fun with COVID, actually. We had just really gotten the ball rolling right before it hit, so we were kind of nervous, but we had some really great online groups. When we initially started, we were trying to stay very local, but we had to expand our net, and we had people from all over, some students from Minnesota, people from out of the country, and it was really great. And we would just do the Tai Chi at our house, and we'd encourage them to follow along, and I could kind of see them moving in the thumbnail. But the energy was still there when we all got back face-to-face on the camera, and everyone had a really great experience with it.
Yeah, and we've decided, so we learned during COVID, we needed to get innovative, and we took our first course, which is all we really had at that time, and figured out how to do it virtual. And we were really pleased with how that went and the impact we were still able to have. We've had requests to do all 3 classes virtually. And where we're at the moment is we'll do the first one virtually, and we'll do the third one virtually if they will come face to face, and we'll compress the second 5-week course into a 2-day workshop, so it's manageable for people. So that way, we get a chance for them to feel this stuff hands-on, and yet we can, the bulk of the time that they spend can be virtual, and you reduce the travel cost and all that to just one trip.
Yeah, we feel that. The science indicates that connection is a really important ingredient for learning and growth. And you do get some of that virtually, but where we're trying to work with the body and the nervous system and get kind of responses from people, it helps to have at least some of the course in person.
Because they are going to be in person for real life.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, it's easier transfer of learning. Although a lot of people spend half their working life on virtually too, so it's all good.
Right. The world has changed some, and I really appreciate hearing how you have listened to feedback and evolved to the situation. And I think that really seems like a testament to how you both are embodied in the work that you're doing and paying attention to how people are showing up and how they need you to show up. There's a piece that you keep on kind of mentioning, which is around the stress reduction and relaxation piece. Why is that important? What made you create this offering?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead and start.
So this kind of gets to our own personal stories, and we like to share this in our classes, and we'll keep it brief here. But my personal story is I became aware of this stuff pretty late in my career, like starting about 7 years ago. So I had spent 15 years embedded in a corporation. I had spent 20 years consulting with organizations. And what I was consulting about was, we called it project management, but it was, what I was interested in was how people can tap into the team's personal commitments. So we're not operating from tasks and activities. How many tenths of a person need to go do this for how many tenths of an hour? It was about people speaking, this is what I can get to you. Is that when you need it? And does it have all the qualities that you need? Tell me what you need from me and when you need it, and I'll do my best and let you know if I can't do it. And, I had a pretty successful career doing that. And I had a huge blind spot that I was not aware of throughout most of that career. And so I happened upon a course by a guy named Bob Dunham, who created the Institute for Generative Leadership. I think you guys have some experience with that as well. And at the first conference I went to with Bob, I realized, first of all, for the first time, I realized that I was completely cut off from my body, right? Because we were doing some of these embodiment exercises and people were sharing what they were feeling in their body. And, I'm like, I got nothing. If I feel anything in my body, I do my best to suppress it because all it does is aggravate me. And I was very clear. That's the way it showed up for me. So I learned that I had this blind spot and that there might be some value in learning how to get in touch with that and get out of my head. And the second thing I learned that I didn't know that Bob taught me is that commitment, which I've been working on for 20 years, it doesn't reside in your head, it doesn't reside in your words, it resides in your body. So if you can't get in touch with that, you don't really know what you're committed to. And then how are you going to connect with people and help them articulate what they're committed to if you can't be in touch with it yourself? So,
Tim,
yeah.
Tim, you said something there that I think is really important. I remember going through some of my trainings and they would talk about models, the body, brain, heart. And we spend so much time thinking about the brain as separate, that it's something that rides on top of the body, as opposed to the brain is the body, right? It is totally influenced. It is totally impacted. It influences and impacts the rest of your body. You have a consciousness that may be as separate, but all of the brain work is body work. And I'm hearing in what you and Amanda are doing a really tight integration and recognition of that fact that so often gets separated out in so many of these kinds of programs.
Exactly. One of the people who is most articulate about that is Amanda Blake. I believe her book is called Your Body is Your Brain.
It's a wonderful book.
Close to that. And we bring several elements of that into our courses. And, even if people say, well, it's not just the brain, it's the central nervous system, they're still missing the whole person. It's the whole nervous system. It's not just the central nervous system. We have huge bundles of nerves in our gut, right, in our heart, like you were referring to. And they're not just waiting for signals from the brain. They're sending signals to the brain. So I wasn't paying attention to any of that. It took Bob's course to kind of, knock me on the head, and I got committed to learning more about that. And that's what led to, creating an awareness around what I was doing. I was over preparing for everything. And then when I went in, I wasn't present. I was trying to control everybody to just do what I said, because I didn't want them to go out of these boundaries where I hadn't prepared. And just incidentally, as part of the story, it was the same month that I went to Bob's class for the first time that I went to my first class with Amanda on Tai Chi. Completely a coincidence. But then, what I realized over the course of the next year or two, because I kept going because I liked it, was that this was a practice that worked for me to get me out of my head and into my body. And so it was making those connections that caused me to stick with it.
I love it, and I'm curious. You and I worked together 20 years ago, and I remember the old work that you used to do, and had a lot of respect for the quality of what you were doing. I'm hearing your awareness of how you were showing up and how effective you were. Were you getting any feedback from anyone? I mean, we're all surrounded by managers and teammates and partners who ostensibly want us to get better at what we do. Were you getting feedback that you needed to change or do what you were doing better? Or did this all kind of come from within for you?
I think it mostly came from within. I had a voice that was telling me all the time that I had to practice more. I couldn't take this chance. I was going to blow it. And when we worked together, Dan, I mean, I know one of the contexts you saw me in was teaching a course that was a pretty intense simulation course, and it was a very full day with a group of 80 leaders in a room, and I was performing. So I had practiced and practiced and practiced, and I was performing. And every once in a while, somebody would come up with something that I didn't anticipate, and I would crash and burn, at least for a little bit. But if that didn't happen, I could get through the day looking like a pretty good instructor. But that came from memorizing those lectures and knowing exactly what's going to happen at each turn during the day. I want to let Amanda share a little of her personal story also, because one of the things that we found so interesting was our lives are different. We came at this at very different parts of our lives, but there's some interesting parallels in how we were able to learn it and apply it.
When I found out that relaxation is power, I was not already successful like Timm. I was 14 years old when I took my first Tai Chi class, and I signed up just because I had too much anxiety to take any other PE credit. I was like, I knew I couldn't do it. I wasn't healthy enough. I had so much anxiety. I had terrible asthma. I didn't even know how to breathe in my own body. I was severely underweight. My immune system was terrible. And I just couldn't keep up with my peers. So when I was signing up for classes in 8th grade, and the school I was at had a Tai Chi class for a PE credit. So it ended up being such a life-changing experience for me. My instructor there, whom I still take classes from sometimes, his name is Peter Hill. But I remember that first class. It was impactful right away. And it's a very basic Tai Chi principle, but it also goes so deep that relaxation is power. That as you learn to let go of tension, as you learn to be calm and present and confident, that you're more effective. And we would learn it by punching. When you're stiff and you're scared of punching, you're scared of we would learn to break boards and stuff. When you're scared of the board and when you're trying really hard to perform and it's very external, that muscle tension stops you and you don't break the board. But when you learn to be calm and be present, hearing your center and feel it, you're in your own body, you're in your own power, your fist goes right through that board effortlessly. It's amazing how much more effective you are when you're relaxed. It's an empowering feeling. So that's where it started for me, where it changed my body, it changed my health, it changed the way I connected with other people. I wasn't scared or shy anymore. So it turned everything around for me. And so then I started teaching in all kinds of places, everywhere I could. Got a bunch of black belts in several, arts. And I opened a martial arts school for a little while, which is still very successful now. My partner runs it. It's been a fabulous journey for me. And that's where it all started.
And one thing I just want to add, because we both started our stories and we've talked about, anxiety and, not always enjoying our situation, which has changed, I think, for both of us a great deal. So when we first started, I thought, well, this is going to be good for people like us, right, who have lower self-confidence, who have some of these anxiety issues. I've also learned that just about everybody has that to some extent, even if they never show it. But I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to help everybody or just those people that had sort of the low confidence. And I remember in one of the very early one-off workshops we did, we were playing on this theme of oak and willow, and we were having people do these somatic exercises with an oak feel, very solid, very forceful, and then a willow feel, just kind of going with the flow. And one of the women who I've known for a long time is very successful. She did some of these exercises, and she said, "This is really interesting. All of my life, I have done everything in an oak fashion, and that's it. Just because that's the way things get done, but it doesn't always work." And I've always kind of wondered how come sometimes it just doesn't work? And now I'm realizing there's more than one way to approach a situation. So, when we see insights from people across the spectrum of levels of success, levels of confidence, that tells me there's something powerful here.
Yeah, as you were sharing the story, I'm flashing to several of my clients who are very competent, are very confident, but they crash and burn when they're trying to do a presentation to an executive because they're in performance mode. I have to show them that I know what I'm doing. I have to tell them what I need them to know, as opposed to being in the dance. What can I do to help this person get to the decisions they need to make? How can I draw on all of my expertise to bring it forward in the right moment to help the person that I'm talking to, as opposed to staging something that I'm assuming everyone will understand. And that confidence, when you're so used to doing it right, is something that I see people struggle with over and over and over.
Yeah, and it's, so many possibilities are missed, right? When I was a consultant, I was very effective at getting across, what I thought was the most important thing to get across. I also know now in hindsight, there were opportunities that I completely missed, right? Opportunities that would have changed the whole relationship with the client and their relationship with their effectiveness as a team. But I was so focused on what I knew and what I decided to tell them that I missed it or I fumbled it. When it came up, I didn't know what to do.
So you mentioned teams, and I'd love to dig in there a little bit if you don't mind. So I was in corporate for 30 years, and I've seen mindfulness programs. I've seen bring in gyms, and everyone should, go run for 30 minutes every day, and lots of physical things, lots of mental things. What does this bring beyond some of the programs people have already seen in work or in their personal lives?
That's a great one. Do you want to take that one?
I can, unless you want to talk about some of your experiences and how you've seen that in schools.
Definitely.
School leadership teams.
Yeah, so we had a great course with the city school district here, local to us, where we got to teach intact teams. And that was really great because we were giving them experiences together, learning to interact in new ways, but we were also giving them language to use and help them in their interactions. So it made it very actionable for their work. We also talked about specific goals that they had in their company and the way those were and were not being met, and points of tension for them in their body or with their maybe their personal cares or values that weren't quite aligning right with this goal. And we got to help everybody communicate and get on the same page and kind of have this experience where they all got to embody the company's goal and really rally around it. It was really powerful.
And in doing that, it allowed them, what we found was they had this long-standing group-wide resentment. They felt very underappreciated. Not every single person articulated it, but most of the people in that group at some point during the curriculum articulated, not being appreciated, not by their teammates, but by the administration and by the teachers. This was a group of people that were responsible for all of the logistics, the transportation, the food, everything but the teaching.
Yeah, purchase orders, everything.
Everything. They made happen, all the IT, they made happen in the schools. And they had internalized this lack of appreciation until it was sort of what they had in common versus their goal, which we helped them kind of get back to, right? So they were very centered on how they were underappreciated. We helped them get back to, but why are you here, right? And their answer to a person was, we're here for the kids. We're here because the kids, this is a very important stage of life. We want every kid to have this opportunity. And you could see things shift. And an important part of that shift, no matter what the situation. So, one of the things we have people do is identify dissatisfactions in their work life, can even be in their home life. Work on that. That's what's important to you. And always a huge part of that process is understanding how there isn't a problem out there that's creating this dissatisfaction. There's things that they're doing, the way they're holding this situation, the way they're giving their power to other people that is making this a problem for them. So almost always when people start to have a big shift, they're seeing the world differently, right? They're perceiving things differently. Oh, I don't have to do that if I don't want to. And wow, I don't have to be offended by what those people are saying. That's actually not the truth. That's just their opinion. Anyway, I don't want to go too far into it, but shifting people's awareness is a big part of what creates the important shifts. But they can't do that if they're not in touch with their body, because so much of it is about how are you reacting when these things happen, because that's what you can change. That's what you can control.
Absolutely. Another important part of being able to make those shifts, I think, is staying curious. And that's why I love that we named our company the Leader Lab, like laboratory. We are experimenting. We are trying to find answers, and we might have a hypothesis, but we want to find out. We want to prove. We're staying curious. And my teacher, Peter Hill, always said, your body is your laboratory. And that's where we're testing things and feeling it. That's where a lot of the insight comes from. So it was cool to see them stay curious. We had to remind them sometimes, like, that's kind of a closing mood you're showing up with. Let's stay curious. Let's stay open. And they were able to learn a lot and see the situation differently.
Yep. I should mention, sorry, Elayna, just we're probably coming up on our time pretty soon, so just however you want to use that. I mean, we've got a few minutes, so
fine.
Go ahead.
Okay.
But just we can start to close.
I was just going to say, it's so interesting what you're bringing here, and thinking about closing moves and opening moves and becoming aware of our body. And there's a theme here that seems really important of getting to practice something, of basically showing up in uncertainty, right? Tim, you said it multiple times, like not having to practice the performance that becomes really difficult to keep at when something unexpected shows up. It seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're creating a space for leaders to be able to show up in ambiguity and practice what it feels like to show up in that ambiguity and do it better? Is that?
Well, I feel like I'm sounding like a bit of a martial art nerd today, but another common martial art saying is warriors develop the endless capacity to adapt. And you can't be adaptive. You can't protect yourself if you're only going to do the thing exactly how you practiced it 1,000 times. Like, you have to be able to shuffle your playlist a little bit, do things a little bit differently. And that's definitely what we're trying to create a space for.
And an important part of that, what I was trying to find, because it connects exactly to your comment, Elayna, is yes, we're creating those situations for them to practice in, and we're being very deliberate about cranking up the pressure just a little at a time, right? So it's about taking small steps. So it's about help people design the next small step, right? So we give them some small steps that everybody does in class, and they all apply it to their current dissatisfaction or situation. But then it's time to go out and try it, at work. And we help them design just a small step beyond what they did in the class, and then come back and tell us about that. And then if you got some benefit from that, let's ratchet it up a little bit more. And if you didn't, let's take a different tact. But that's an important part of it.
And you mentioned mood. I'm also hearing helping people to reinterpret the signals from their bodies. That I've got that heart beating, I've got that tightness in my chest. Is that because I'm afraid, I'm weak, I'm threatened, or I'm ready? And those positive versus negative moods, those open versus closed moods, and realizing that the signal my body is sending me is mine to choose, not something that's controlling me. And then as a leader, I can make choices for the most effective, most powerful, most satisfying actions to take that signal from my body and turn it into practice to go create change, to engage the world, to engage my team in ways that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love what you two are doing. This is a fantastic experiment. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to bring to our attention?
What's really interesting about this work is we can take any of these distinctions that we talked about today, like emotions and moods that you were just bringing up, Dan, and go about 10,000 feet deeper. Of course, that's not what we're here to do today. But it really is, for those people who think, oh, I don't know if I want to get into that messy body stuff. I'm more of an intellectual person. That's where I came from. What I found out was this stuff is as interesting as any other part of psychology I've studied in a long life of studying this stuff. I think we would just want to remind people that they can find us at www.evleaderlab.com, that we're really excited to offer our well-being, our new well-being offer. And so we're willing to call us and let's get creative and find a way to do that in a way that you find helpful immediately. And then remind them about our podcast.
Yes. So our podcast is going to be available on YouTube, Mind and Body at Work. So you can we have a lot of really exciting episodes with fun guests that are leaders in a variety of fields. There's a wide range of people that we get to interview, and we'll be talking to many more. So if you're interested in personal growth and leadership and how that's being applied and explored in different fields, tune in and see what our audience of leaders has to say.
We're challenging ourselves to get a very, very diverse group of guests that give us just this huge, wide set of perspectives. So, we're being surprised by some of the things, but we're also finding that they always kind of connect back to some core things that are at the heart of our curriculum and all of the embodiment mindfulness stuff.
Yep. Because everyone that works has a mind and a body, right? So
no matter how much we deny it.
Yep. And you really need both.
Timm Amanda, thank you so much for the opportunity to get to know your work and to give you a forum to share it with your audience. It was an absolute delight. And Elayna, thank you so much for being part of this.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. It was awesome to have this conversation with you.
It was really fun for us to, turn the tables and be the ones answering the questions. You guys did a great job of coming up with good questions, and it was enjoyable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Take care.
All right. We'll see you, for our listeners, we'll see you next time on Mind and Body at Work with a new guest.